It started like any regular evening in Memphis. Police responded to a burglary call at rapper GloRilla's home, expecting to handle a typical break-in. But what happened next shocked even the most experienced officers. As they busted through the door, what they found inside was not just suspicious, it was something that would flip GloRilla's entire life upside down. You won't believe how fast things went from calm to complete chaos. The officers expected an empty house or maybe a few stolen items, but instead, they found multiple people inside who claimed to be house guests. That's when things started getting weird. The people inside all had different stories. One said they were there to feed a pet, another claimed to be a cousin, and someone else said they were crashing there for just one night. But none of them had keys, and none of their stories matched. Officers quickly noticed something was off. They reported strong smells, strange packages lying around, and what looked like signs of illegal activity. Let me tell you, this is where it gets interesting, because what started as a simple burglary call quickly turned into a full-blown raid. Officers called for backup, and soon the whole place was crawling with law enforcement. Several individuals were handcuffed and taken in for questioning. GloRilla wasn't home during all of this, but when she arrived later, completely unaware of what had happened, she was immediately pulled in by the police. You can imagine her shock, walking into your own home and seeing flashing lights, cops everywhere, and strangers in handcuffs. But here is the shocking part. While police have not released full details, they confirmed that certain items found inside the house are now tied to an ongoing criminal investigation. And the moment that news got out, rumors started flying faster than ever. Some said it was drugs. Others whispered about weapons. A few even claimed it had something to do with past people GloRilla used to hang around with. This is how quickly your past can catch up with you. Just when GloRilla was enjoying her rise to fame, dropping hits, doing interviews, and building her brand, this happened. And to make matters worse, people on social media didn't waste a second. Her name started trending within minutes. Memes, videos, even fake headlines began circulating. But what made this story different? It wasn't just the raid. It was who responded next that truly sent the internet into flames. Out of nowhere, gospel singer and controversial pastor Deitrick Haddon posted a video that hit harder than anyone expected. And the craziest part, he didn't even mention GloRilla's name, but we all knew exactly who he was talking about. He said, "You can't walk in purpose and play with the world. Either you're going to lead or get dragged by the chaos." That message hit fans like a ton of bricks. People were stunned. Some praised him for speaking truth. Others said he was using someone else's downfall to make himself go viral. But no matter what side people were on, one thing was clear. The lines between hip-hop and the church had just been crossed, and it was about to get messy. As the firestorm on social media continued to grow, GloRilla's silence became louder than words. She didn't tweet, she didn't post on Instagram, no statements from her publicist. Nothing. And for someone like GloRilla, known for her boldness, her voice, her presence, that complete silence spoke volumes. Insiders close to her team revealed that the decision to go quiet wasn't fear, it was strategy. Her lawyers and managers advised her not to say a single word until they understood the full extent of the damage. And trust me, the damage was already spreading like wildfire. Brand deals that were in motion just days before came to a sudden stop. One major fashion label had been planning to feature GloRilla in a campaign focused on women empowerment, but after the raid, those talks were paused. And it didn't stop there. Gospel artists who had once publicly supported her began deleting posts, removing likes, and even unfollowing her. The same people who cheered her for mentioning God and showing up at gospel events now disappeared into silence. This is where it gets real. GloRilla had been slowly entering faith-based circles, performing at a few gospel-related shows, even speaking about her spiritual journey. But now, everything was falling apart. One gospel figure posted anonymously, "She tried to walk in both worlds. Now she's realizing you can't serve two masters. And that statement started to spread. Behind the scenes, her team was in full damage control. Emergency meetings were held, PR strategies were rewritten, image consultants were brought in to try and fix the narrative. Because this wasn't just about saving her music career, it was about saving her public reputation. GloRilla was no longer just a rapper. She had become a figure people were watching to see how far she could go. But now they were watching for a completely different reason. And while all this was happening, GloRilla was spotted in Los Angeles. Dressed in a hoodie, dark glasses, and surrounded by security, she ignored paparazzi and fans calling her name. No eye contact, no words, nothing. Just a quiet walk to a black SUV. And people started to wonder, was she hiding? Was she broken? Or was she preparing for something bigger behind the scenes? Because just when it seemed like things couldn't get more intense, a new rumor started making rounds. A well-known music insider hinted that GloRilla was secretly working on a new track. Not just any track, but one that would subtly address everything that had just happened. No interviews, no direct responses, just music, a single song that might flip the narrative. If true, this would be a powerful move, but it also risked pouring more fuel on the fire. Would people listen to the message, or would they see it as an attempt to dodge accountability? At the same time, the gospel world was going through its own crisis. What started as a few online reactions quickly turned into something deeper. Churches, choirs, and ministry groups across the country were now arguing not just about GloRilla, but about what her presence in gospel spaces truly meant. Some megachurch pastors began speaking out, not just against GloRilla, but against Deitrick Haddon too. One well-known pastor who chose to remain unnamed said during a live stream, "We are living in a time where wolves come dressed in sheep's clothing. You let the profane step into the holy, and this is what happens. Disgrace." And then even artists like Tasha Cobbs Leonard and Tamala Mann, who had nothing to do with the situation, were pulled into the mess. Fans flooded their comments, demanding they take a side. People weren't just reacting anymore. They were choosing sides. And the entire gospel community was slowly breaking into two camps. One calling for repentance and separation, and one crying out for grace and understanding. The divide wasn't just in comment sections or live streams. It was now happening inside the walls of churches, in leadership meetings, and private text threads between choir directors and youth pastors. It had become personal. Because this wasn't just about GloRilla anymore. This was about what kind of people the church should welcome and what kind of influence it should protect itself from. The older generation of pastors and gospel veterans stood firm. The line between the sacred and the secular had been crossed, and it needed to be redrawn quickly. One church leader even said during a Sunday sermon, "You can't let hip-hop into the sanctuary and expect holiness to stay untouched." But the younger voices were not staying silent either. One viral clip showed a passionate young pastor in Atlanta saying Jesus didn't run from sinners, he sat with them. If GloRilla walked into your church right now, would you throw a blanket over her and turn her away? Or would you welcome her to the altar? That clip alone was shared thousands of times, igniting a powerful discussion. This is where it gets even more complicated, because many of the younger generation grew up with hip-hop. They know GloRilla's music. To them, this wasn't about defending a celebrity. It was about asking the church to open its arms wider. Meanwhile, churches started reacting in real ways. Some canceled upcoming events that had booked Deitrick Haddon to speak or perform. They didn't want to be associated with what they saw as a publicity stunt or a betrayal of their values. One choir director admitted, "We love Deitrick, but this time he got it wrong. He forgot who he was preaching to." At the same time, screenshots began circulating in church groups. discussions where pastors were debating whether artists like GloRilla should ever be allowed to perform or even speak at faith-based events again. Some ministries were calling for a full-on ban of secular artists on gospel platforms. And it wasn't just drama anymore. It had turned into a spiritual battleground, the kind where every side believed they were fighting for truth. One side believed protecting the church's holiness meant closing its doors to anyone who didn't fully live by its standards. The other believed true healing could only happen if the church stayed open, even to those who stumbled. And caught in the middle were two public figures, GloRilla and Pastor Hayden, who never expected their names to become the center of such a deep and painful debate. But here's the twist. Insiders claimed that GloRilla had been working behind the scenes on a deeply personal track, one rooted in her faith, her struggles, and her relationship with her grandmother's spirituality. A song that might have changed everything. That track, now shelved, probably forever. One music executive revealed she was trying to bridge the gap. She wanted to reach the church, the streets, and speak her truth. But this scandal wiped all that progress away. Still, while some gospel leaders were cutting ties, her core fan base, especially younger Gen Z followers, refused to turn on her. They continued streaming her music, defending her online, and saying the church was being too harsh. But the gospel world wasn't as forgiving. Some leaders went as far as publicly calling her unfit for faith stages. It became clear her crossover into spiritual spaces had come to a hard stop. And the same went for Deitrick Haddon. What once was considered bold gospel innovation now looked to many like dangerous compromise, and his name too was slowly being pushed out of sacred spaces he once helped build. As the smoke of controversy continued to rise, all eyes turned to the final question: what now? What would GloRilla do next? And could Deitrick Haddon recover from the backlash that threatened to rewrite both of their legacies? For days, GloRilla said nothing. No apology, no denial, no clarification. But behind the silence, her team was working nonstop, trying to control the damage and protect what was left of her public image. According to insiders, several church-related appearances were quietly canceled, her PR rollout for upcoming collaborations was delayed, and her brand deals were on hold indefinitely. But here's the twist. What most people didn't know was that this controversy didn't just pause her career. It also crushed her personal hope of using music as a spiritual bridge. She had plans to release a powerful gospel-inspired track, a track that came from a real place, her upbringing, her struggles, and yes, her faith. But after the raid and Hayden's viral rebuke, all of that crumbled. One executive close to her team said she wanted to speak to both the streets and the church, but this ruined that message before it ever had the chance to be heard. And even though many fans stood by her, it wasn't enough to erase the stain left by the headlines. In the eyes of many church leaders, she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Meanwhile, Deitrick Haddon was dealing with a storm of his own. What was supposed to be a moment of bold truth turned into a major backlash. People began dissecting his sermons, questioning his intentions, and accusing him of turning someone else's pain into his platform. Even the Gospel Music Association reportedly received over 2,000 emails in just 48 hours from people demanding they cut ties with him. But it wasn't just the emails, it was the deeper sense of betrayal. Hayden had built a reputation as someone who blended gospel with urban culture, someone who wasn't afraid to bring the message to modern music. But now, critics said he had lost touch with spiritual responsibility and crossed into chaos. One gospel radio host put it this way: he wanted to stay relevant, but relevance without reverence is just noise. Still, some fans defended him, saying his message wasn't hate, it was warning. They believed he wasn't attacking GloRilla, but trying to open the church's eyes before more artists lost their way. They argued that the church should be a place of healing, not public shame. And maybe, just maybe, this moment got blown out of proportion by people who were already uncomfortable with the idea of hip hop and gospel ever being in the same room. But that's the real conversation, isn't it? This controversy didn't just expose GloRilla or Deitrick Haddon. It exposed a deep wound inside the church, a wound that's been ignored for years. The battle between tradition and modern culture, between the need to protect the sacred and the desire to reach the broken, between standing on holiness and opening the doors to people who don't look, act, or sing like the church has always expected. And at the heart of it all was one young woman, a woman who danced in a church with the joy of someone who probably never believed she'd be welcome there. Maybe it was out of order, maybe it was messy, but that moment forced the church to ask a question it had avoided for too long. Who is the church really for? Will the gospel world learn to embrace the broken without compromising its foundation? Will GloRilla find a path back? Or has the door been slammed shut for good? Can Deitrick Haddon rebuild the trust he's lost? Or has his voice lost its place in the conversation? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, the battle between hip-hop and the holy pulpit just got personal. And the echoes of this scandal will be felt for a long time to come.